earth in shadows, restlessly home, labor's waiting in silent hope for the promise it comes to me, what heaven holds. Then the angels in holy haste lift their anthem, your Savior lays in a manger in humble form. Your King is born. Hail the Prince of Heaven comes, angel choirs sound the call, for this babe wrapped in a cloth is the incarnate Word of God. Oh, the kingdom and its power, resting now in this child, Prince of Heaven, Jesus, hope of the world. This means mercy in fullest form, loving kindness forevermore. Son of David and Son of God, He is Christ the Lord. Hail the Prince of Heaven comes, angel choirs sound the call, for this babe wrapped in a cloth is the incarnate Word of God. All the kingdom and its power, resting now in this child, Prince of Heaven, Jesus, hope of the world. King of glory, we gladly greet, born in wonder and majesty, forever worthy, the earth will sing. O Prince of Heaven, we worship thee. King of glory, we gladly greet, born in wonder and majesty, forever worthy, the earth will sing. O Prince of Heaven, we worship thee. We can know Him who is Prince of Peace, in light of mercy, confess our sin, lay our burdens at Jesus' feet, and with gladness sing. Oh, hail the Prince of Heaven comes, angel choirs sound the call for this baby wrapped in a cloth. The incarnate Word of God. Oh, the kingdom and its power resting now in this child. Prince of Heaven, Jesus, hope of the world.
Well, good morning. My name is Paulette Anderson, and I serve here in our middle school ministry. We just want to say welcome. Thank you for joining us here this morning at Church 321. This morning, Josh Tillman will be finishing our series, Simple. So if you'll please just stand and continue to sing with us.
I need you to soften my heart, break me apart. I need you to open my eyes, see that you're shaping my life. All I am, I surrender. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good, your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. I need you to soften my heart, break me apart. I need you to pierce through the dark, cleanse every part of me. All I am, I surrender. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good, and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. 'Cause I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. I must be fair, my God, you never will. 'Cause I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. 'Cause I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. And my flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. And I may be weak, but your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, but my God, you never will. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good, and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith, just what you say, that you're good, and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
Thank you for singing with us. Will you please have a seat?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Josh Tillman, for those of you who may not know me, and I'm the Student Ministries Director around here. And you guys made it. You guys are the group that made it through a very busy weekend. We had Thanksgiving, which is always a great time. We had Black Friday. If you're anything like my wife, all your Christmas shopping is done. And if you're anything like me, you're like, we got Christmas Eve coming up. I'll do my shopping then. But you guys are the ones that made it through. You made it through the big game on Saturday, which was a great game. I know some are more happy than others, but it was a good game. It was fun to watch. It is now the Sunday after Thanksgiving, which Greg's friend just pointed out is, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, the day all the youth pastors get to speak, which is ever so true this morning. And, Black Friday was just here. I'm not sure if you guys are into Black Friday. I'm typically not. I don't like crowds as much, but I did do some Black Friday shopping this year, and there was just this deal that has just nothing to do with my message at all, or Jesus. But I'm going to tell you this because I'm just that excited, and I think that if you were to live your life this way, you'd have a much happier life. So this is what I did. If you're like me, you hate having mismatched socks. This sounds like the beginning of a really bad TV or infomercial commercial, where it's like wah, 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 in black and white. But I hate not being able to find socks. So you have to kind of hop around the house in one sock because you're trying to look for the match. That drives me nuts. I don't like standing there when I do the laundry or when my wife does laundry and then match all the socks together and put them in the drawer. It's boring. I hate it. So this is what I did, okay? We went to the Hanes outlet store in Birch Run. We drove 2.5 hours to get there. And I bought 60 pairs of plain black Hanes socks. So I went home and I emptied my sock drawer and threw them all away. And now I have a sock drawer full of socks that will always match no matter what. Yeah. That's the big idea for the day, actually, is just get all your socks in bulk. And if you just did that, if you got nothing else out of this message, I hope maybe that inspired you to do something. It's a little bit more simple that way. Yeah, bring it right back around. Smooth transitions. So as I pointed out with my super weird transition, we are in a series called Simple. And this is our third week and final week of the series. But what we've tried to break down the last 3 weeks is just kind of the simplicity of what it means to follow Jesus, what it means to maybe go to church or be a Christian or be religious, whatever term you want to put on it. Because it seems like more and more, as each day passes, it gets more complicated to be a Christian, or it seems like it's more complicated to go to church or follow Jesus, whatever term you want to put on it. But around here, we believe that following Jesus is one of the most important things that you can do with your life, but we also believe that it's simple. And my notes just died, everybody, so we're in for a long service. This is going to be a fun time. Service is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. All right. But we really believe that following Jesus is simple. We believe that there are 3 simple steps to following Jesus, being in a relationship with Jesus, whatever term we want to put on it. In the first week, we talked about this word. We talked about follow. And following just looks a lot like what you're doing right now. It doesn't mean having it figured out, having all your questions answered. It just means doing what you're doing, sitting in a church, maybe getting involved in a life group and asking questions and trying to get answers to those questions, cracking open the Bible and reading it for yourself. That's kind of the process of following. It's just taking steps towards figuring out who Jesus is and what this all means. And if you're like me or a lot of other people in the room, maybe you start following and then one day you just kind of come to this realization like, I believe this stuff. This makes sense. This is kind of becoming who I am. I believe that Jesus is who he said he was. That's kind of the second step. There's follow, there's believe. And then there's this third one, which is what we're going to talk about today. And it's kind of the stickiest part of Christianity. It's probably the most controversial one. This is the one that maybe caused you to say, hey, church just really isn't for me. Faith just really isn't for me. Or maybe it caused you to kind of sit on the outside and go, I don't know about this. Or maybe you're just like me and you're just like, I'm just trying my best to figure this out. But the third step after follow and after believe is this word right here, obey. The word obey. And you can just feel how every service, the room gets so quiet when I say that word. It's like in The Lion King when they're like, Mufasa. And they're like, ooh, say it again. Mufasa. Ooh. That's like how this word is to us. It's just like this big, hairy word, and we're just like, oh, don't go there. Let's not talk about that. You know, you're like, of course, the 1 week we go to church, we have to talk about obedience. But it's just kind of this big thing, and it's hard to kind of wrap our heads around. It's hard to understand. And obedience really is a scary thing. It's something that, I kind of think we push back on in our nature. And hopefully what we're going to do today is kind of peel back some of the layers around the fear of obedience and around the fear of what that means. And when I hear that word obey, I can't help but kind of think of this term, like mother knows best or father knows best or because I said so, something like that. And it kind of reminds me of one of my favorite Christmas movies, if not my favorite Christmas movie of all time, The Christmas Story. Right, where Ralphie, he's trying to decide, his mom's asking him what he wants for Christmas, and he says, I want a Red Ryder BB gun. And he knows like the exact model number. He knows everything about this gun. And his mom says, what? You'll shoot your eye out. She's like, no, you're not getting that BB gun. You will shoot your eye out. And he's kind of just pushing it. He's kind of trying to drop hints all the time to get her to buy him this gun. And, he asks again, like, I really want this BB gun. She's like, no, you will shoot your eye out. And what happens is, spoiler alert, everybody, the dad buys him the BB gun and saves it as this like last present. And Ralphie opens it and he's all excited. He can't wait. He's running outside to go shoot it. And his mom's, making him put on a coat and all that kind of stuff. And he gets outside and he's been waiting weeks and weeks and wanting this so badly. And he puts the gun up to his shoulder and he shoots it. And what happens? He gets hit right in the eye. And you can just see his mom. She never says it because moms don't do that. But you can see it in their face. Just this kind of look of, I told you so. You didn't listen. I told you so, and you shot your eye out. Or this thing that happened in my own life. I remember when I was a kid, we went to Skyline Chili. And if you've never been there, it's terrific. It's super good. You should definitely go. And you don't care about this, but the secret ingredient to their chili is they put cinnamon in it. I know, no one expected that, but yes, cinnamon. It's very, very good. You should try it sometime. But Skyline Chili, we went there. It's like a Cincinnati-ish type store or local to there. And we were eating there, and it was with my mom and dad, my aunt and uncle, and then my cousin, who's about the same age as me, and we were younger. And we were sitting in a booth separate from my parents, and we made up this game, which was really fun. We would take the hot sauce bottles that were on every table, and they weren't these glass bottles, not like Tabasco bottles. They were like those plastic, those squishy bottles. And we would take them, and we would slam them down on the table, like as hard as we could, to see who could get more hot sauce to come out of it. It's a great game. I suggest you play it at lunch today. It's a lot of fun. And my dad looked over at us just slamming these bottles down on the counter, and he was like, hey, stop doing that. Like, don't do that anymore. And I remember thinking to myself, well, why? Why do I have to stop doing it? Dad, why do you want me to lose the game? Why should I have to miss out on this? Why do I have to stop when no one's telling her to stop? Why do I have to stop and she doesn't? Why do you want me to miss out on this? And when my dad would kind of look away because he was at a separate table, I would take the bottle and I'd slam it down and keep playing until one time I went for like the Hail Mary of this little game that we made up. And I just like took the bottle and like a touchdown spike, just like took this thing and just slammed it on the table as hard as my like 5-year-old little arm could. And I looked down to see how much hot sauce came out, only to see a spout of it going directly into my eyeball. And if you've never had hot sauce in your eye, not fun, not a good time at all. It was very painful and it burned a lot. And I remember I just started bawling my eyes out. I'm like covering my eyes, they're burning. I'm like, I'm gonna go blind, I'm never gonna see again. This is how it all ends. And my dad has to come and pick me up and take me into the bathroom of a chili restaurant, so you can picture that smell. And he has me just sit under the sink, and I just have to rinse my eyes out and get all the hot sauce out. And I remember sitting under the sink thinking, I should have listened. I should have stopped when my dad told me to, because I'm crying hot sauce, essentially, at this point. But that's this hard thing about obedience, is it doesn't really come naturally to us. If you're a parent, you know that you never taught your kids the word no. They just somehow all of a sudden learned the word no. Because obedience is kind of the scary concept to all of us, to have to obey somebody else or be under somebody else's, or be under the obedience of somebody else. And hopefully what we're going to do is kind of strip away the fear around that this morning. But if I was to ask you to come up with a list of rules, like just what's the first thing that pops in your head when I say list of rules? I think a lot of us, we would say the law, click it or ticket, that kind of stuff. But I think for a lot of us, something that would come up almost right away is the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are like the epitome of a list of rules. It's something that we all know about, especially in our culture. It's something that has shaped other cultures for thousands and thousands of years. It's kind of like one of the oldest lists of rules that there ever was. And it even shapes our legal system today. A lot of our laws are kind of centered around the 10 Commandments. And we may not know all 10, we may know like 3, but we know what the 10 Commandments are. And today we're going to look at when God gave the 10 Commandments and what that meant to the people and kind of look at the context around that. And I think it's going to give us an insight into God's heart for us and God's heart for obedience. So if you have your Bibles with you, please turn to Exodus 19. If not, it'll be on the screen. I'm going to just set up the story for us before we dive in this morning. If you grew up in church like me, this is like the 1,000,005 time you've ever heard this story, but it's always good to get a brush up. But if this story is new to you, go pop some popcorn real quick because it's a good one. So we set up our scene, all right? Egypt is the most powerful nation in the entire world. And the Israelites are living as slaves in Egypt. We've all read books. We've all seen movies. We all know how terrible, how miserable slavery can be. These people are working from dawn until dusk, working in tough conditions. The second they slip up or they don't measure up, they get beaten or mistreated. They're not being fed very well. They're living in closed quarters. They can't pick their job. They can't spend time with their family. They're living as slaves. And God looks at this and he says, hey, I'm going to do something about this. But God doesn't raise up this huge army. He doesn't release some secret weapon of some kind to release the slaves. No, he just goes to a man named Moses, who used to be in the Egyptian government. He says, hey, Moses, I want you to go talk to Pharaoh, the head of the Egyptian government and the most powerful man in the world, and I want you to convince him to let go of all of his slaves. And Moses is like a little hesitant. At first he's like, I don't think so, God. That sounds like a suicide mission. But here's the thing about God. He's a pretty persuasive individual. And he says, Moses, I want you to go. Moses finally says, okay. So he steps up in front of Pharaoh, and he's like, hey, Pharaoh. And, Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world at this point, he says these words to Pharaoh that we all know, and we can all say them together, let my people go. And Pharaoh's like, no thanks. Like, I'm not going to do that. Why on earth would I let go of all of my free labor? What would happen to the infrastructure of my country if I was to let all of these workers go? Like, get out of here. That's a stupid idea. Leave before I have you killed for even suggesting something so insane. And at this point, what God does is he kind of punishes the country of Egypt for saying no to him. He begins to send plagues in, and people are sick, and they have hives, and he begins to send animals in. And basically what happens is all non-heaven breaks loose inside of Egypt to the point where Pharaoh says, all right, Moses, take your people and get out of here, because the second I said no to you, all of this stuff started happening, and I cannot live this way anymore. Take your people and go. And what happens is the Israelites follow Moses. They follow God through Moses out of Egypt. The Israelites begin to follow God through Moses out of Egypt. They follow God through a parted body of water to safety. They follow God into a desert. They follow God out of slavery and into freedom. And they're in the desert, and they're kind of walking around the desert, and they're kind of like, hey, we've been enslaved for generation after generation. We don't really have the tools to learn how to provide for ourselves and live on our own. So God's like, okay, I've got you. I have got you. I'm going to provide for you water, and God provides water through a rock, which is insane. I'm going to provide for you bread. I'm going to provide for you meat. And the Israelites are like, this is awesome. We were enslaved not too long ago. God, we followed you out of slavery. God, now you're providing for us. This is like the best rock water we've ever had. God, thank you so much. We believe you are who you say you are. We believe that you are our God. And what happens is this process that we've begun to talk about takes place, where there's a follow, then there's belief, and then there's obey. I think what happens so often in churches these days is you walk into a church and some guy who looks a little bit like me gets up and tells some weird story about his childhood, and then he says, hey, obey. Make sure you obey. And you're like, obey what? And he's like, well, obey God. And you're like, well, obey what God? And they're like, well, God. Just obey. Quit asking so many questions. And that's so dangerous because as we see, God demonstrates to us it's not just about obey. You can't have one without the other. There has to be this process of follow, of belief, and then obey. And right before God gives the 10 Commandments, he says a line to Israel that I think is just so powerful into this concept of obedience and what it means for us and what it means for us to live in obedience with God. So if you have your Bibles, we're in Exodus chapter 19, verses 4 and 5. If not, it'll be right up here on the screen. This is what God says. He says, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians. You know how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey and keep my covenant, you will be my own special treasure from among all the peoples on earth. God says, look, you know what I just did for you. You saw what happened in Egypt. You saw what extent I will go to bring you to me. God didn't say, hey, here's 10 things that you should do. If you can keep these and maybe not do some of these and do some of these, then I'll rescue you from slavery. No, God says, hey, you are enslaved, and when it was your darkest hour, when it seemed like there was no hope left, when you were at your lowest point, I stepped in, I intervened on your behalf, and I rescued you from slavery. I led you from slavery into freedom without requiring a thing from you, because that's how much I love you. That's how much I want to be in relationship with you. And you followed me out of slavery, and that's great. And you believed that I was your God and I'd provide for you, and that's awesome. And now that those things have been established, now that we've established a relationship with one another, I have a couple of things I'd like you to do. Now that we've established this relationship, I didn't just show up and say obey. Now that we have an established relationship, there's a couple things I'd like you to do. This isn't just specific to God with the Israelites. Jesus also behaves this way when he's walking around during his ministry. Because Jesus didn't walk up to people. He didn't walk up and say, hey, stop doing, or hey, start doing. He walked up and said, hey, why don't you come follow me? Jesus doesn't walk up to Zacchaeus, who's sitting up in the tree, and say, Zacchaeus, you better start, thou shalt not. He says, Zacchaeus, why don't you come down and follow me to your house? Let's have a conversation. And when we see, the pattern we see with not only God and the Israelites, but with Jesus and the people he interacted with, was just this pre-established relationship, this pattern of follow, believe, and then obey. Because they knew, and it proves this point right here, which is when we know that somebody has our best interest at heart, when you believe somebody has your best interest at heart, it takes the fear out of obedience. When you know that somebody has your best interest at heart, it takes the fear right out of obedience. This is why some of the craziest decisions you've made are in the name of love, because you were dating him, you were dating her, and you guys were in love, and you believe that they had your best interest at heart, so they convinced you to get their name tattooed on your forehead, and you did, or you went there, or you went here, or you did whatever it was that they wanted you to do, because when you believe someone has your best interest at heart, you are wide open to their influence. And that's what Jesus sets up. That's what God sets up here. They say, now that we have a pre-established relationship, now that I've rescued you from slavery, now I want you to begin to obey. Now I want you to do a couple of things. And it's really important, too, because if we can just go back to that verse for just a moment, there's this word in there that God says to the people that I think is just, it shows God's heart in all of this. He says, now if you obey and you keep my covenant, you will be my own special treasure from among all the peoples on earth. It's a cool thing for God to say that, hey, you're his special treasure. God doesn't say, like, hey, if you keep these, if you can keep the rules, that's what will make me love you, or that's what will make you love me. He says, no, if you keep these rules, you'll be a special treasure amongst all the people on earth, because you will stand out from all the people on earth. You will look like a treasure compared to them. Because remember, God's giving them this list of rules. He's giving them the 10 Commandments in a very barbaric time where the life expectancy was not very long, and they had just come out of a culture of slavery. And God says, if you can live like this, if you can live and embrace these things and kind of set these things aside and avoid these things, then you will stand out to the people around you. You will have a contagious personality, a contagious belief. You will be something special, something to treasure. And we don't just see this happen with the Israelites. We see this also happen with the first century church. The first century church went from this small little movement inside of a little city to overtaking the most powerful and the biggest empire that has ever existed, the Roman Empire, the very empire that killed Jesus, the leader of the Christian church. How does something like that happen? I think it's because obedience is what makes the difference. Obedience is what makes the difference. Because this is what happens, is it started with this group of people who were following Jesus. And as they followed Jesus, they began to believe in what he was saying. They began to believe in what he had done for them. But it didn't just stop there. Because the world didn't really notice this group of Christians. Christianity didn't really grow, didn't really explode when people were just saying, hey, I follow Jesus, or hey, I believe in Jesus. When the first century church began to obey, began to act out, began to let Jesus' teachings change them and affect the way that they treat other people, the way that they see themselves, the way that they respond to the world around them, that's when people started to take notice. Because they said, wow, this group of people has a peace like we have never seen before. This group of people doesn't fear death. They understand that this life is about far more than this life. They are generous beyond anything I could ever imagine. When you do something wrong for them, they pray for you. They turn the other cheek. This group of people is something that I've never seen before. And what happens is people from the outside started to take notice when the early Christians in the early church began to act out of obedience for what Jesus had taught them. Because remember, there's nothing that would allow them to grow. There's nothing, they don't have any special lights, a cool stage, great communicators. They don't even have a Bible. All they have is what Jesus taught them during his life. And the first century church grew from this small little movement into an entire empire. And here we are 2017 years later, still talking about it. Because people noticed a difference in the way that they acted and in the way that they lived, and it was something special. People began to say, I wish my daughter would date somebody like that. I want to work for somebody like that. I want to be a father like that person's a father. I want to have a faith like that. I want to have a peace in hard times like they do. And people from the outside began to notice and said, I want to believe what they believe. And the Christian church grew exponentially and grew from this small little movement into an entire empire. When people started to act out of obedience, when they allowed obedience to make the difference. Because they began to follow Jesus. Then they believed in Jesus. And then they lived the way that he taught them to live. And this concept of obedience is still so strange. It's still something that we push back on so much. But I think we're going to look at a verse in John that really shows us Jesus' heart for us and for how we are to live in obedience. This is a verse that if you grew up in church, it's something you probably know very well. It's a short verse. It's a simple verse. It's very straightforward. But it's in John 10:10. And it starts this way. John 10:10 starts with, the thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. That's some pretty intense words from Jesus there. Those are three really negative words back to back. A thief's purpose is to steal, is to kill, and is to destroy. You may be asking yourself, like, okay, well, what's a thief? Is it those guys that, wear like that little bandana and steal your TV? I don't think Jesus is talking about physical thieves here. I think Jesus is talking about anything that's willing to rob you, anything that's willing to steal your attention, anything that's willing to rob you of joy. And I think that if we can look at this and think of thieves as regrets. I mean, just think about, I'm going to kill the whole vibe of the room, but picture your biggest regret. Think of your biggest regret that you have in life. Everybody stopped making eye contact right when I said that. But think of your biggest regret in life and just kind of hold on to that. Because I don't know what your biggest regret in life is, but I do know that regrets, they steal, they kill, they destroy. Maybe it's just the guilt from that regret that is stealing your joy in your current situation. Maybe it's that substance abuse that you had that stole your relationships and your money and it killed your relationships with your friends and your family. Maybe it was that sexual immorality that killed your marriage. Maybe it was that gossip, that rumor that you started that ended and killed a relationship. I don't know what your biggest regret is, but I know that your regret is stealing something from you. And Jesus says, I am not offering you something that will kill and that will steal and that will destroy. Jesus said there are lots of things that are telling you to put your trust in them. There are lots of things that are telling you that they have your best interest at heart. But Jesus says the purpose of me coming and living is to give you life and give you life to the full. Because we look at the end of this verse, he says, my purpose is to give them a rich and a satisfying life. If you grew up with a translation like me, it was, that he came to give us life and give us life to the fullest, or he came to give us life and give us life abundantly. Which actually brings us to our big idea for the day. So if you forget everything else that I say, remember this one thing, and it's that obedience leads to abundance. Obedience leads to abundance. And the second we hear that word abundance, I think we immediately tie it to a possessional abundance. Like, oh, hey, if I obey, then I'll have like a really cool car and a house with granite countertops, and I'll get to wear fancy watches and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not talking about possessional abundance here. Jesus is actually talking about something that is far more valuable than any possessional abundance. He's saying, do you want to know how to be a better father? You want to know how to be a better wife, a better spouse, better boss, better friend? Do you want to know how to better handle life and the situations that arise? Because that's what I'm coming to offer you. And there are so many things that we allow ourselves to obey, but when it comes to the Bible, when it comes to God, when it comes to religion, we're so hesitant. It's so scary to think of obeying the Bible or Jesus, a man who lived thousands of years ago. But I'm willing to bet that, I know this man passed away, but if Steve Jobs was to walk into this room and stand up here and say, hey, you guys want to know how to never lose battery on your iPhone? And he said, if you want to know how to never lose battery on your iPhone, all you have to do is lick your screen. I bet all of us would walk out of here with wet phones and probably a cold sore or two. But if Steve Jobs said, hey, if you lick your iPhone, you'll never lose battery, we would all do it. Because all of us understand that the person who created something, the guy that created the iPhone, probably knows how it works the best. And yet we're still so hesitant to lean into and to listen to and to turn our ears to what Jesus has to say, his guidelines for how maybe we should live our lives and interact with one another. But Jesus says, I created everything. Nothing you do can come as a surprise to me. Marriage doesn't come as a surprise to me. Sexual things does not come as a surprise to me. I created both of them. Your friendships and relationships, they don't come as a surprise to me. Disease does not surprise me. I created all of it. And because I created all of it, I know how it works the best. And Jesus doesn't say, my purpose was to come and help them understand the 10 Commandments better. Was it my purpose was to come and give them this set of rules, to raise a standard so high that when they didn't meet it, I could wag my finger and say, shame on you. Jesus doesn't say any of that. Yeah, that's how we view him. Jesus says, I have come so that you can have life to the fullest. Jesus saying this is just Jesus being a good parent. Because when my dad told me, hey, stop hitting that bottle of sauce on the table, what I heard was, hey, I want you to miss out on something. I want you to stop having fun. But what he meant is, I love you and I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want you to end up with hot sauce in your eye or a mess all over the floor, whatever the case is. I don't want you to get hurt. And Jesus looks at us in the exact same way. He says, I have come to give you something that is so much beyond what you could ever imagine, a life that is so much greater than anything that you could ever even hope for. I know how it works. I love you. I love you, and I am for you. I am for you so much. I have your best interest at heart. When I chose to die on a cross, I was thinking of your best interest. And I have your best interest at heart. You can trust that. I have come to give you life, and I've come to give you life to the fullest that I can possibly give it to you. I want you to avoid hurt. I don't want you to get addicted to that. I don't want you to fall into sexual temptation. I don't want you to experience divorce, broken relationships, broken friendships. I don't want you to experience the hurt and the pain that we all know life can bring. Jesus says, I don't want you to go through that. I want you to have the fullest and the greatest and the most joy-filled, abundant life you can possibly have. But in order for you to do that, you have to be willing to obey. Jesus is saying, I'm going to have to require something of you. Because this is the part I think a lot of us hop off the train. You know, like following, okay, that's pretty easy. You know, we get free donuts when we come to church. Yeah, I'll follow a little bit. Believing, it's good. Like, hey, I have this kind of back pocket thing where I'm like, hey, you know, there's life after this. I'm kind of got my fire insurance, so to speak. I'm going to heaven. Belief is one thing, and those are really crucial steps. But a lot of us kind of jump off the train at obedience. And Jesus is saying, don't fall short there. Don't sell yourself short. Have life and have it to the fullest degree that you can possibly have it. So my challenge to us is for us to pick up our Bible and just begin to read the life of Jesus. Begin to watch how he responded to people. Watch the things he said to do, the things he said maybe to avoid. Because I think if we do that, and if we can model ourselves after that, the way that the first century church did, the way that the Israelites did, I believe we will have a contagious personality. Somebody said a quote to me in between services. They said, it's a John Eldridge quote, and I'm going to mess it up, but they said the truest glory of God is when man is, Dad, what was it? Say it out loud to everybody. It was really good. The glory of God is man living a full life. Isn't that beautiful? That God's glory is not about us living a rules-oriented life. God's glory is when we can live the fullest and most abundant life possible. But we have to be willing to obey. We have to be willing to examine the life of Jesus and say, I'm going to put some things aside and I'm going to embrace some other things. And it might be difficult, but at the end of the day, it is going to give me a life far better than anything else that I could ever hope for. So if you don't have a Bible, we have free Bibles for free forever over in the Welcome Center. Please go take one, no questions asked. If you have a Bible and this sounds interesting to you, I'd just really encourage you, open up the New Testament and read about who Jesus is. Get in a life group and talk to other guys, other women about who Jesus is. Because when we embrace what Jesus has offered us, it doesn't hold us back. It doesn't make life more boring. It doesn't keep us from anything. It actually propels us into a life that is full of joy and a life that is abundant, so much so that other people will start to notice. And maybe other people will start to follow and believe and obey. Will you pray with me? Father, we are just so grateful for you and who you are, and just this reminder that you wanted so much more for us than just ordinary. You wanted so much more for us than the hurt and the pain and the drawbacks of life, so much so that you were willing to go through that hurt and that pain yourself. Father, I just pray that as we move throughout our week, that you would help us to remember the things that you have laid out for us, that you would help us to remember that when you ask us to do something, that when you require something of us, it isn't out of guilt, it isn't out of shame, it's actually out of wanting us to have more, wanting us to live fuller. And so, Jesus, I just pray that as we go through our week, you would help us to remember to obey, and that you would help lead us in this process of following, of believing, and of obeying. We pray all these things in your name. Amen.
Every breath, with every word I speak, with every step, with every heartbeat, Jesus, let it be for your glory, my whole life, all for your glory. Every step, with every heartbeat, Jesus, let it be for you only, my whole life, all for your glory, all for your glory. My life is in your hands, trust it all to you, my dreams and all my plans, trust it all, forever I'm changed, I'll never be the same, 'cause of your love, forever I'm changed, I'll never be the same, 'cause of your love, because of you, Jesus, whoa, because of you, Jesus, whoa, for all my days, God, you are my God. I give you all, my heart is open wide. Jesus, let it be for you only, my whole You are everything, everything. You are all I need, all I need. I'm forever in love with you. Forever in love with you. Everything, everything. You are all I need, all I need. I'm forever in love with you. Forever in love with you. Everything, everything. You are all I need, all I need. I'm forever in love with you. 'Cause my life is in your hands. Trust it all to you. My dreams and all my plans. Trust it all. Whenever I'm changed, I'll never be the same. 'Cause of your love, 'cause of your love. Forever I'm changed, never be the same. 'Cause of your love, 'cause of you, Jesus. Whoa, because of you, Jesus. Whoa. Well, hey, everybody. Good morning. Just a few things before we let you head out for the day and into your week. First and foremost, congratulations. Spencer was named to the OMEA, which is the Ohio Music Educators Association, All Ohio State Choir this week. Congratulations. They know what we already know, right? He's got a great voice. And now we're just trying to talk him into staying here in Toledo and not going to Nashville. Hey, Josh, come on back up here because we have an announcement to make to all of you. It's been kind of a long time coming, kind of in process, so we want to make sure we're very clear on some communication with you today because you have a big announcement, and that is that you are officially putting your hat in to run for mayor of Toledo. We're excited about this.
Appreciate your votes, everybody.
We're planning early. We know we just elected one.
I'm going to do a terrible job. I promise you that right now.
But hey, that'll be right on par with everybody else that served in that. I'm sorry. That's as political as I get. And now I'll probably get crucified and email. Jeremy B at church321.com. Josh.
I will not be running for mayor of Toledo. Sorry to disappoint you. I don't know. But so I just have an announcement to make, and I just want to be as upfront and communicate it to everybody as best as possible. And just kind of hold to the end before we freak out because there's a lot to explain. Or
the applaud.
Or the applaud, maybe, yeah. Starting next Monday, I will be working at Chick-fil-A. I'll be starting at the Sylvania and Talmadge one, for those of you who are interested in that. I will not be leaving my position as the student ministries director here, but I will not get paid for it any longer, if that makes sense. So I will be stepping down as the student ministries director from a paid standpoint. However, I will still have all the same responsibilities that I had before in regards to running youth group, meeting with students, meeting with leaders, and putting on retreats and big stuff. So all of that stuff will still happen. I essentially just won't get paid for it anymore. Kind of like what Tina does in the kids area. Yeah. She runs everything back there, and she does not get paid to do it. So thank her if you see her. But,
yeah, please do.
She does a great job. But that's basically what I'm going to be doing as well.
You know the question everybody's asking. Why? Why would you do that? You're in a paid position in ministry, which is what you love to do.
It's true.
Why? The high school students finally just got to you, didn't they?
Yeah, no, that's not
Trust
it
me,
at all.
I know. I drank.
So as a leader, I always want to be getting better as a leader. And I recognize that I have strengths as a leader and I have weaknesses. And I think the last 2 years here have really helped me build into my strengths and kind of recognize my strengths and weaknesses. However, I definitely have some things I need to work on in order to be a better leader. And I just think that this opportunity that was presented to me to take this job is going to really help push me in the areas that I'm weakest in. And I really hope, I hope that you guys see this as a positive thing, not a negative thing. I struggle too sometimes. But this has been a decision I've made after months and months of praying and fasting and meeting with people and talking about it. And just funny, we're talking about obedience. This is really where I feel God has called me for this season of life. I feel like he's called me out of vocational ministry and into this position in order to be a better leader and be a healthier leader. And hopefully, not only our church will benefit from it, but our ministry as well.
Absolutely. So let me tell you, because we know everybody has the conspiracy theories, and people are going to be like, well, this is just a cover, right? Because money's really, really tight. We just paid for a brand new parking lot, so it was either the parking lot or Josh, and we took the parking lot.
That's not true. This has nothing to do with our church finances in any way. We still need you to give, only because Jesus says so. It's kind of an obedience thing. But it has nothing to do with that. This has been a while now, several months now, where you've been talking about it. And one of the things I've mentioned in our staff meeting just a week ago was that the greatest quality I think a leader can have is to be a lifelong learner. Like that you've never arrived, that there's always things you got to be stretched at, learning at. I'm in a brand new position. Yeah, it's somewhat of what I did for years, but this is brand new to me. I'm still learning, even after 3.5 years here. And there's a great quote. I should have mentioned this in the other services, because there's a great quote by Craig Rochelle, who's the pastor at Life Church in Oklahoma, and he says this: when you step into a new leadership position, it is not your confidences that come to the forefront, it's your insecurities. He is absolutely right. That whenever you step into a position of leadership, or you step up into a position of leadership, when you step into that, it's not your confidences that I can do this that come to the forefront. It's the realization, I can't do this.
Like everyone can see your bald spot under the lights.
Well, geez, really?
Not yours, mine.
Oh, I'm trying to hide it. And that's only to say that, Josh, we talked about it. It's just, yeah, there are things as leaders that both of us can be doing. And sometimes finding another environment stretches you. And for Josh, I think the biggest thing will be in a team environment, because even here, it's a whole different environment than probably what you're used to working in your job situation. There's a lot more interconnectivity. It's just a very, very different thing in ministry. So I'm excited for Josh, because that hopefully means a free waffle fries when I stop by.
Play your cards right.
It also means that you'll be my son's boss right behind you.
That's true. I will be Nathan's boss.
You will be Nathan's boss.
But I just really want to say that any questions that you guys have for me, please come and ask me, because this is not out of anger. Nobody chased
we didn't
me
get into
out.
a fight. There was a neck drop. There was not like a knockdown like pre-trib, post-trib, amillennial, premillennial.
Yeah, there was no fight, or there was no broken relation. I mean, this is just straight up God, I think, calling me to something different for this season of life. And I just really want to thank everyone that supported me throughout my internship and just this last year as well, because our ministry, I think, has really benefited from having a full-time staff person. And it's been really great over the last 2 years, but ultimately, I don't want to just be stagnant as a leader. I don't want to just take my ministry as far as I can take it. I want to constantly be getting better. And I think that this opportunity will allow me to do that. I will still be around. Abby and I, this is our highest priority, is this church and you guys, and we love being here. And I will still be here for all the services, and I will still speak whenever they allow me to, and I will still hang out with your students and your kids, and I will be around, but I just won't be paid.
So from a high school student perspective, what changes for them?
Nothing at all. I mean, we'll still have youth group every week. The only thing that really changes is during the day, instead of being here and available to meet up, I will be at Chick-fil-A working, but you guys are all in school anyway, so we never.
I think this is an incredibly courageous step for Josh to take, and it is one of obedience. And it's challenged me, so maybe I should pick up that part-time job at Brew as a barista, because you guys know my love affair with coffee. So anyways, if you do have questions, literally ask any of us. Well, I think one of the things we've always said about 321 that we've kind of prided ourselves on is transparency. We're genuinely who we are, and we'll tell you exactly what's going on. And Josh's email is still the same. We haven't stripped him of that. He's still josht@church321.com. If you have questions, ask him. Engage with him in conversation. Just don't do this. We've talked about this repeatedly. Sometimes in relationships and sometimes in our job experiences and family experiences, we have gaps. And these gaps occur between when somebody lets us down or the decision that's made, and we don't know why. There's a distance that's bridged. Jeff says he's going to be home, Amy, at such and such a time. He's not home at such and such a time. I know that never happens for you guys. But there's this gap, right? And all of us, all of us fill the gaps. And how we choose to fill the gaps relationally determines where we go. So we want to be very authentic with you about this. There are no gaps to fill here. This is a challenge that Josh was given a couple months ago, has debated it, prayed about it, thought about it, conversed with people about it, and for a season feels this is the direction to go in. And we're going to champion that with him. Absolutely. You're scheduled, by the way, in just a few weeks, so I'll give you the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I still definitely feel like ministry is, that's what I'm going to school for, and that's where I feel like my life is headed. And I just feel like right now, we'll be doing ministry,
Absolutely.
Just not being paid to do it anymore. But again, please, any questions, please come up and talk to me. I am an open book.
He is. That's absolutely true. All right. Well, with that in mind, next week we begin a brand new series that takes us up to the Christmas season. Take a look.
Christmas isn't complete without a delicious turkey. This stunning bird will be the center of your family's holiday feast. It may look daunting, but if you follow my simple instructions, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3.
Take the turkey out! Listen, get out of there! Take it out! Away! Kelly! Take the stop! Kelly! Put the turkey out of there!
Open the doors. I need a fire extinguisher.
Go find one!
Carmen, it's out. Forget the turkey.
So as Greg said, we'll be starting our new series, Who Needs Christmas, next week, and that will lead us all the way up until our Christmas Eve services at the end of the month. And while you're preparing for the Christmas season, we ask that you would join us as we are partnering with the Sylvania Area Family Services again this year to provide Christmas for 7 area families. We've said this before, but Church 321 is in Sylvania and we're for Sylvania. And so this is just another opportunity for us to help those in our community around us. So we ask that before you leave, please do this. Before you leave, head out of the auditorium and to your left, and you will see lots of bulbs that look like this. And on them, you'll find the name of someone. So this one says a 10-year-old little boy who needs board games. There's clothing items, there are food items, there are gift cards, and some fun little presents that they're looking for. So while you're out and about shopping for yourself and for your family, please purchase some items for these families as well so that we can provide them with a Christmas that they wouldn't get to have. So you'll buy them, wrap them, and attach the bulb to the outside of the gift and bring it back before December 17th, and we'll be able to then give it to those families. So please join us in doing that. Next, if you are visiting with us, thank you so much for spending your Sunday morning here with us at Church 321. We also ask that you would stop by our Welcome Center and fill out a welcome card so that we can get to know you better, and we can give you a free Church 321 mug as a way of saying thank you for spending your Sunday morning with us. And finally, you may have noticed that we don't take up a traditional offering, but if you brought something you'd like to give, there are 2 gray boxes that you can drop it in on your way out, or you can visit our website at church321.com and give online. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your week.